Piscean here. In this video, we're going to do a deep dive on the zodiac sign Gemini. Before we get started, please like, subscribe, comment, share if you dare and care, with peace and love. Bringing you this video with the help of AI agent Grok and Gemini. Alright, so what is Gemini? Well, the living dialogue. Okay, mutable air, domicile of Mercury, the twins, and those born May 21st through June 20th will have the sun in Gemini. So first we begin with the core astrological architecture. You see that Gemini is not simply the third sign, it is the first breath of differentiation after the pure will of Aries and the embodied desire of Taurus. Where Aries asserts I am and Taurus stabilizes I have, Gemini asks the more dangerous question, what is this? And then immediately, what else could it be? It is the principle of relation through distinction, the mind's capacity to split, compare, name, and reconnect. As mutable air, Gemini is the most kinetic of the air signs. Air is the element of thought, language, and social exchange. Mutability is a modality of transition, adaptation, and the dissolution of fixed forms so that new configurations can arise. Together they produce an intelligence that is not primarily about depth of single focus, that is more Virgo or Scorpio, but about velocity of connection and the ability to hold multiple, even contradictory perspectives without immediate collapse into synthesis or judgment. So, all that to say, Gemini, velocity of connection. Essential dignities and correspondences. So we have our attribute here, value, as well as significance. So, for example, the element air, it's hot and wet, it's thought, language, social circulation, and detachment. Modality is mutable, adaptation, transition, multiplicity, and flexibility. Ruling planet here is Mercury, diurnal domicile, messenger, intellect, commerce, mediation, and trickster. Polarity, yang, masculine, diurnal, outward, active, expressive engagement. Body rulership is arms, hands, shoulders, lungs, nervous system, dexterity, breath, neural speed, and gesture. This is significant. Natural house is the third house. Siblings, short journeys, early education, and local networks. Opposite sign is Sagittarius, detail versus overview, data versus meaning, local versus foreign. Tarot key is the lovers, choice, duality, relationship of opposites. And the key phrase, I think, is identity forged through mental activity and dialogue. In classical doctrine, Mercury holds domicile in both Gemini and Virgo. Okay, so Gemini is a diurnal, being the day home, the place where Mercury operates with maximum freedom of movement, plurality, and verbal agility. There is no traditional exaltation or fall assigned to Gemini, except some would say Saturn and, Well, actually, yeah, some would say Saturn in Gemini actually causes people to have like very serious mental health problems. Jupiter is in detriment here. Opposite is Sagittarius domicile, underscoring that broad philosophical expansion is less native than fine discrimination and rapid exchange. All right, mythological genesis, the divine twins. So the constellation Gemini is anchored by the two bright stars, being Castor and Pollux, or the Dioscuri. Their myth is not a simple story of identical twins. It is a precise symbolic encoding of asymmetric duality, the central Gemini paradox. Leda, queen of Sparta, was visited in one night by both her husband, Tyndareus, and by Zeus in the form of a swan. From this dual conception emerged two brothers, Castor, mortal, son of the king, and Pollux, immortal, son of the god. They became inseparable companions, warriors, horsemen, argonauts. When Castor was killed, Pollux refused immortality without his brother. Zeus granted them an alternating existence, one day among the gods on Olympus, the next in the underworld with the dead. Their shared fate became the constellation. And this myth crystallizes Gemini's core tensions, being mortality and immortality coexisting in one bond, the finite mind and the infinite possibility of language. Loyalty that transcends death, the willingness to sacrifice singularity for relationship. Alternation rather than fusion, Gemini does not permanently resolve duality, it lives the oscillation. And the messenger function. The Diosuri were saviors of sailors. Appearing at St. Elmo's fire, they mediate between worlds. Earlier Mesopotamian tradition associated the great twins with Gilgamesh and Enkidu, the civilized king and the wild man whose friendship humanizes both. Across cultures, the twin motif returns, the Ashvins of the Vedas, the dual columns of Hermes, Shashin, and Boaz. Gemini is the archetype of the threshold, the double door, the place where one becomes two so that dialogue can begin. The heavenly twins express opposites fused together like twin beams from one light. Excuse me. All right, on to a psychological and archetypal profile here. And we see at the depth psychological level, Gemini enacts the drama of the split and the dialogue. Liz Green and others have noted that the twin symbolism frequently manifests as an inner division projected outward. Good and bad twins, the reliable self and the restless self, the serious student and the trickster. Integration does not mean eliminating one pole, it means recognizing both as interior and allowing them to converse. Signature strengths of a mature Gemini expression. We see cognitive multiplicity, the capacity to hold several models of reality simultaneously without forced reconciliation. Linguistic dexterity, language as a living instrument rather than fixed code. Wit as a form of precision. Cross-pollination, the ability to transfer insight from one domain to another, generating unexpected analogies. Social permeability, ease of entry into diverse circles, the gift of making others feel mentally met. And we see adaptive intelligence, rapid recalibration when new data arrives, resistance to dogmatic closure. Alrighty. And shadow dynamics of the unintegrated Gemini. We see scattered attention, the collection of data without synthesis, perpetual beginning without arrival. Superficiality as defense, using cleverness or constant motion to avoid the vulnerability of depth or commitment. Duplicity without awareness, speaking different truths to different audiences until the self becomes a hall of mirrors. Nervous overstimulation, the mind that cannot stop, leading to anxiety, insomnia, or burnout of the nervous system. As well as fear of stillness, silence experienced as emptiness rather than as the ground from which genuine thought arises. So the evolutionary task of Gemini is to move from information gathering into meaning making through relationship. The mature Gemini does not abandon multiplicity. It learns that the most interesting conversations happen when one stays long enough for the other to finish speaking, and then responds from a place that has actually heard what that individual said. Now let's look at Gemini through the houses. It's a condensed genius map. Wherever Gemini falls on a house cusp or is strongly occupied by planets, that life area becomes a theater of curiosity, dialogue, dual perspectives, and rapid movement. The following is a high-resolution distillation. So, as we see here, the first, Gemini in the first house, identity is ongoing conversation, presence defined by mental agility and verbal charm, restlessness and self-presentation. Gemini in the second house, value derived from information, skills and networks, income through communication or multiple streams, fluctuating sense of security. Third house, Gemini, native placement, sibling dynamics as primary teachers, lifelong student, short journeys as oxygen, writing and speaking as life force. Gemini in the fourth house, home as information hub or revolving door, family stories as living library, emotional security through mental stimulation and variety. Gemini in the fifth house, creativity through wordplay, performance or multiple media, romance as sparkling dialogue, children as conversational partners. Sixth, Gemini in the sixth house, work as mental multitasking, health sensitive to nervous overload and respiratory issues, service through teaching or information design. Gemini in the seventh house, partnership as continuous exchange of ideas, attraction to witty, versatile, or dual-natured others, contracts and negotiations as art form. Gemini in the 8th house, curiosity about taboo, psychology and shared resources, intimacy through intellectual disclosure, transformation via dialogue with the shadow. Gemini in the 9th house, philosophy as a collection of perspectives rather than a single system, travel as mental expansion, teaching and publishing as natural outlets. Gemini in the 10th house, public reputation built on versatility and communication skill, career in media, education, sales, or any field requiring rapid adaptation. Gemini in the 11th house, friendships as networks of ideas, groups, and causes approach with intellectual curiosity, future vision through collective conversation. And Gemini in the 12th house is hidden mental life, unconscious patterns around siblings or early communication trauma, spiritual path through contemplative study or dream dialogue. Now we look at planets in Gemini, selected high resolution notes. Mercury in Gemini, its domicile, the purest expression of the messenger. Mind is hyperlinked machine. Speech is rapid, versatile, and often witty. Risk of mental restlessness or speaking before fully thinking. At best, a living library who can translate between almost any two domains. Sun in Gemini is identity is distributed across interests and conversations. The self is experienced as a process of inquiry rather than a fixed essence. Vitality rises with mental stimulation and falls in environments of enforced monotony or emotional intensity without intellectual framing. Moon in Gemini, emotional nourishment arrives through conversation, variety, and light contact. Needs mental space and the freedom to change emotional weather, can intellectualize feeling as a productive strategy. Learning to stay with one emotion long enough to metabolize it is key growth. Venus in Gemini, love language is primarily verbal and playful. Attraction is intelligence, humor, and variety. Can struggle with sustained emotional depth if it feels confining. Thrives in relationships that remain intellectually alive. Mars in Gemini, assertiveness expressed through words, debate, and strategic mobility. Conflict is often verbal rather than physical. Energy disperses across multiple projects. The challenge is to choose a few battles and to stay with them. Saturn in Gemini structures the airy mind, can produce serious, disciplined thinkers, writers, or teachers. Early challenges may involve communication anxiety, learning difficulties, or a sense that one's voice is not heard. Mastery brings exceptional clarity and authority of expression. Compatibility, career, health, and remediation. Okay, so we're going to talk about Gemini in regards to the relational dynamics.
So Gemini thrives with partners who can match or enjoy mental velocity without demanding constant emotional intensity. Okay. So strong natural resonance with other air signs such as Libra, Aquarius, and with immutable signs we see Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces when mutual respect for difference is present. So fire signs can supply passion and direction, while earth signs can ground the restlessness provided neither tries to fix the other. Okay, so the opposite sign Sagittarius offers classic polarity of detail versus big picture, local versus global, data versus meaning, when consciousness axis produces extraordinary teachers, writers, and translators of culture. All right. And Gemini's vocational fields of natural strength, any domain that rewards rapid information processing, verbal fluency, adaptability, the ability to connect disparate people or ideas such as journalism, writing, editing, teaching, translation, public relations, sales, marketing, consulting, media, technology, especially interface and communication design, comedy, debate, short form content, and any form of brokerage or mediation. Gemini offers thrives. It thrives in portfolio careers or roles that permit multiple simultaneous projects rather than single track specialization. Health considerations. So classical and modern response links Gemini to the arms, hands, shoulders, lungs, and the nervous system. Common vulnerabilities include respiratory sensitivity, nervous exhaustion, repetitive strain in the hands, arms, and anxiety patterns related to overstimulation. So supportive practices, conscious breathing, regular movement that engages the upper body, digital hygiene, periods of deliberate quiet, and any discipline that trains sustained attention without crushing curiosity. You see remedial and developmental practices. Cultivate one or two deep, long-term conversational or intellectual relationships that require staying power, as well as practice completion rituals, finishing a piece of writing, a course, or a project before starting the next. Study a tradition that values silence as highly as speech, Zen, contemplative prayer, certain forms of meditation. Use writing as a mirror, journal not only ideas, but the emotional weather beneath them. Mercury-friendly metals and colors. Quicksilver associations, yellows, light blues, and gemstones such as agate can be used symbolically to stabilize the mercurial current. And look at esoteric and philosophical horizon here. So in esoteric astrology, Baylor lineage and related streams, Gemini is deeply connected with the Antakarana, the bridge of consciousness that links the lower mind to the higher. The twins represent the dual nature of the soul and incarnation, being the personality and the spiritual self, learning to communicate. Planet Mercury, as esoteric ruler in some formulations, becomes the agent of this linking. So the sign is associated with the second ray of love wisdom and its more communicative expression, and with the process by which divine ideas descend into the multiplicity of forms so that they can be known through relationship. All right, so philosophically, Gemini embodies the insight that identity is relational. There is no quote-unquote self that exists prior to dialogue. So Mercury, typically we see, even with Virgo, androgyny and gender fluidity. So the self arises in the space between. And this is why Gemini can feel both exhilaratingly free and existentially precarious. So the conversation stops. Who am I? The answer the sign ultimately offers is that conversation never truly stops. It only changes partners, editors, and media. The task is to become a conscious participant rather than a restless channel. So I think, therefore, I relate, therefore I am and am becoming. Look at the eternal Gemini lesson here. Gemini teaches the universe, that multiplicity is not a failure of unity, but its necessary expression. Without the twins, there's no dialogue. Without dialogue, no discovery. Without discovery, the pure will of Aries remains mute, and the embodied desire of Taurus remains solitary. Okay, so the genius of Gemini is the recognition that every fixed position is only a temporary resting place in a larger conversation, and that the most intelligent response is often not an answer, but a better question. Wherever Gemini is activated in a chart is where the native is invited to become a living messenger, to gather, to compare, to speak, to listen in, when the moment is ripe to weave the scattered threads into a pattern that others can use. The ram charges to pull hold. The twins converse, and in that conversation the world becomes intelligible. In this deep dive is an original synthesis drawing upon classical Hellenistic sources, as well as mythic morphology, depth of psychological interpretation, and esoteric doctrine. It is offered in the spirit of Mercury, not as a final word, but as an invitation to further dialogue. Thank you for watching this video with peace and love, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, see you now.